Welcome to Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, as always, my co-host, Stephen Young of Roto-Grinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we're talking bets for the Goodyear 400 at Darlington Raceway here on Running Hot. Last weekend at Kansas, the race of the year, maybe one of the best races of all time, as Kyle Larson won in dramatic fashion, barely beating Chris Buescher to the line on a late overtime finish, winning by the closest margin in NASCAR history, a finish of 0.001 seconds apart. Chase Elliott comes in third, Martin Truex Jr. comes in fourth, and what was almost a four-wide finish there at the end. And that came after a great race. We saw battles for the lead. We saw passing throughout the field. Arguably one of the best races ever, Stevie. What are your thoughts on Kansas?
How do we get Kansas the championship weekend? Because we've had 5 races in the next-gen car at Kansas, and every single one of them have been fantastic. So, I mean, just another really good race weekend at Kansas, and it just kind of goes to show, like, if you give this car multiple grooves on a 1.5, you're going to get, like, fantastic racing. And Coke 600 is coming up. It's going to be phenomenal. Can't wait for that. But, I mean, the racing at Kansas was great. Like you said, you could pass. If you had a fast car, you could drive through the field. You could make passes. So it was kind of everything we were hoping for last week outside of, like, I will say, like, the Toyotas disappointed a little bit. Like, they had good speed, but where was 2311? They've been so good there, and, like, they just didn't show up. Like, it was a really weird week as far as, like, on the betting and, like, early week betting stuff, but I think overall it was a fantastic race.
Yeah, amazing race. Battles for the lead. We had fuel mileage at one point. I mean, we had pit strategy. There was so much going on in that race. And for me, the betting results didn't turn out great, but they would have been great had that last caution not come out. I went from a plus 8.5 unit day to a minus 9 unit day on that last caution. So that's how it goes. That's NASCAR betting. Sometimes it can all change on a late yellow. But this week we are at Darlington Raceway. This is going to be another fantastic race, Stevie. I know you love Darlington. We all love Darlington. Throwback weekend for the Goodyear 400. Darlington is about a third mile oval, pretty steeply banked. They call it egg-shaped because it's got 2 different radius turns at each end of the track. And of course, very old surface for the asphalt there. So it's going to chew up some tires. We're going to have a lot of tire wear. So what is racing like at Darlington?
Usually really good. Usually fast cars are fast. You got to maintain your tires. So Darlington usually produces one of the best races of the year, nonstop. Like, this race is a little bit shorter than when we'll go back here in the fall, but I like this race just as much. And, like, overall, it typically gives us good racing because, like, you see Diamond cutting one corner, riding the top on one corner, driving it in really hard. But I think I know we're going to talk about, like, what we're looking at handicap and everything, but, like, the one thing that you, like, have to remember when gambling on Darlington is, like, pit road and, like, how pit crews do is huge. It's a huge thing. I weigh it in my model more than I weigh it all year at Darlington because we go to pit road so much here.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to see a lot of pit stops at Darlington just because, like we said, this track chews up tires. It's one of the highest tire wear tracks on the circuit. Plus, it's 400 miles. It's higher speed than Richmond, and we'll see more incidents typically than like a Richmond. So anytime there's a caution, cars will be coming to pit road to get new tires. And that's where, like you said, pit crews are going to matter a whole lot when we're pitting 7, 8, maybe even 9 times in a 400-mile race. And, for the 500-mile race, when we come back here in the fall, even more pit stops. So definitely one strategy here. But Darlington, it's kind of a unique track in that it is 1 1/3 miles, and it's kind of steeply banked. It's got that egg shape. Is there any other tracks that, we can use to kind of build our sample size, similar tracks to Darlington?
I mean, I like using high tire wear racetracks, so I use Homestead. I think Homestead is, like, the track I'm using the most for Darlington to comp it to. Las Vegas is getting closer. Like Las Vegas tire wear is becoming more and more. So like I'm weighing a little bit heavier on like recent Vegas races because Vegas is a steep track. It's a 1.5, and the tire wear has been a little bit higher. We typically could use Auto Club. I mean, I'll use a little bit of Auto Club's data from last year, but not a ton.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie to you. I was messing around with using a little bit of Bristol data from this year with how much the tire wear was and kind of looking at like who maintained tires there and like the
Yep.
veterans. So I used a little bit of that data when I was putting in some stuff into my model this week.
Yeah, and we go back to Bristol. It was Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., Brad Keselowski, three widely veterans who came out on top there, and all three are certainly great at Darlington. Hamlin and Truex are among the favorites in my model. Brad Keselowski stands out in my model compared to some other tracks for him, so I'm right there with you. I think you can pull in some Bristol here. I mostly just use Homestead, but then of course I have that like overall steep track thing. So like you said, Vegas, Bristol, even a little bit of Dover, just guys that are really good at driving at steeper type tracks. And as you mentioned, higher tire wear, so you can pull in some Auto Club from last year as well. So I think those are all like tertiary tracks. Our secondary track is going to be Homestead. And of course, the primary is looking at Darlington history. There are little differences between Homestead and Darlington, right? Homestead's a mile and a half, and it's instead of egg-shaped, it's what we call true oval, where it's 180 at each end of the track. A little bit different banking. It's also got variable banking, whereas Darlington's isn't variable. So little differences. That's why, a driver like Eric Jones might pop at Darlington where he doesn't quite pop at Homestead, or vice versa. You might have some guys that are good at Homestead that maybe aren't quite as good at Darlington. But any other final thoughts on Darlington handicapping, betting for this week before we dive in our picks?
Bankroll management. This is one of the lowest value weeks I've had all year in my model.
Same.
So I just want to kind of preach bankroll management. Like it's exciting. We want to, bet on NASCAR every single week, but I think that the value is what we're kind of chasing the most when it comes to NASCAR betting because of the high variance. And there's just not a ton of it to start the week. So maybe some stuff happens in practice and qualifying and we can kind of take advantage of it. But as of right now, I've bet one outright. And like unless some stuff really changes, I probably won't add much. I might like in race bet more than anything this week because we typically see some value in race betting. Busher was
Yep.
really fast last week at Kansas, and like the books were really slow to adjust like how fast he was, and you could really take advantage of that. I know some people in the Roto Grinders Discord did, so they were all very disappointed when he lost
Yeah.
by a fingertip. But
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I just bankroll management. That's the one thing I want to preach this week as far as like handicapping Darlington. There's going to be some stuff we're going to talk about, but bankroll management's important this week.
Yeah, I was going to live bet Busher 65-1. And by the time I got to it, he had moved down below 30. So didn't end up betting him live, but I was about to and wish I had. But I'm with you. Live betting this week, I think, is going to be one of the best ways to find value because, like you, my model has very little value. I've made 2 outright bets. Earlier in the week, if you follow me in the Action app, I bet Joey Logano 40-1 right at the drop. And then he's since gone shorter than that. And the other one, I'll be giving out as one of my picks. So it is time to dive into our bets. As always, we're going to take you for a lap around Darlington. That's 4 turns, 1 pick from each of us per turn before we drive into victory lane. So it is time to throw the green flag on the Goodyear 400 and dive into turn 1. Okay, Stevie, turn 1, green flags waving. We're going right off the gate here. We're going hard with our outright picks. Which one is yours?
Yeah, I mean, so I said I bet one outright, and the one outright that I bet was Ross Chastain at 14-1. So we didn't talk about it when we were talking about like Darlington and how these races play out, but this race, the spring race here, is a daytime race. It starts in the middle of the day and it's hotter. The racing is a little bit different. Where the race in the fall starts at like 6:00, starts in the day, goes to the night. Very long race. And one thing that I kind of noticed was like Ross Chastain was really good here in the 2 spring races with the next gen car. Like he was second in speed and first in speed in those 2 races, and he really struggled in the fall races. And what's interesting is like Ross Chastain is good at this racetrack type, and I'm just really loving what I was seeing as far as like his speed and where he's at. I mean, it's not even showing value in my model. I just liked what I was seeing. Like there, it's not like
Yep.
my model is showing like 16 to 18 to 1 as value for Ross Chastain. So like this is just more of like I really like what I saw when I was looking into some of the stats and the data, and I'm willing to take a chance on Ross Chastain because even building off of Kansas from last week, we really started to see like Trackhouse and Chastain have some speed, and we got to remember like he has one of the best pit crews on pit road. So that's just another added bump when you're looking at Chastain this week. So I took Chastain at 14 to 1. And again, I'm kind of going against like my model here.
Yeah, no, I'm same with you. I have him about plus 1675 or so as fair value. So right in that same neighborhood as you. But it's Ross Chastain at Darlington. I mean, if we look at the very first Darlington race in the next gen era, he and Larson were battling for the lead for a lot of that race. Both Larson and Chastain ended up having incidents. And, so Ross is DNF 2 of the 4 Darlington races in the next gen era, but he's looked good in probably 3 of the 4. I would say he's looked really good. So definitely can get on board, with going against the model in certain places. And I think this is a spot where, if you want to go against the model and take Ross Chastain 14 to 1, I certainly would not argue with you. For my pick, I'm also going 14 to 1, but I'm taking Christopher Bell 14 to 1 at BetMGM. And look, Darlington's a pretty good track for Christopher Bell. The results aren't quite there, but he's arguably had a car that could finish in the top 6 in each of the last 6 Darlington races, which is the whole time he has been with Joe Gibbs Racing. He has a 5th and a 6th place finish from these 2022 races, so the first season of the next gen era. And then last year he had, a car that sat on the pole, led the first 40 laps, but then he had an incident. And in the first race, he was, inside the top 15, inside the top 10, even in the top 5, average running position inside the top 10 before, again, some late race miscues there relegated him to a 14th place finish. So I have Christopher Bell at 7.7% to win this race here. So 14 to 1, just a little bit too long. So that's going to be my second outright bet of the week, and probably the only other outright I'll have until at least post-practice and qualifying, maybe even up until the green flag where I just look to bet live. So quick thoughts on Christopher Bell before we move on.
I just tailed you. The more I thought about this, I really like it. One of the things that like stands out to me with Bell too is he's so good at qualifying. The number 1 pit stall at Darlington is like a cheat code. It's like literally 5 feet from like the timing line. So like right when you drop the jack, you gun it as hard as you can, and you cannot speed. It's so close. So I mean that's a cheat code. So if he's able to get the pole, we're not going to touch this better than this line if he qualifies well and he has speed in practice. And like looking back at his qualifying here at Darlington, he started first last year, 16th in the spring race, and then in 2022 he started 3rd and 2nd. And we've talked about it many times on the podcast this year. Like his pit crew is the same Ty Gibbs pit crew from last year. They switched over. They're second in crew time this year as far as average pit stops. So again, they're only behind Kyle Larson. And, one of the reasons Kyle Larson's just dominating this year is because his pit crew doesn't mess up. So I like this. I'm tailing you on this one, and I can get on board.
Yeah, no, you've made me like it even more now. It was kind of, for me, it was like, maybe a lean, right? Because I have 7.7% and 14 to 1 is 6.7% implied. So it's like 1 percentage point of value. And I typically like to get a little bit more than that, but now I feel a lot better about it. Remembering about that pit crew and about his qualifying and how important it's going to be here. So even better for me there. So for turn 1, we got our outrights. Stevie has Ross Chastain 14 to 1, and I have Christopher Bell 14 to 1 at BetMGM. So we're through turn 1. Turn 1 and turn 2, of course, at Darlington. You'll be riding the wall, so let's ride the wall into turn 2. Okay, turn 2, Stevie. We're going to go to a pair of top 10 bets. Now, a little bit different price ranges here, so which one is yours?
Yeah, I'm going to go to Bubba Wallace, top 10, plus 115 over on BetMGM. This is like my model is showing this is like the top value bet of the week. Bubba Wallace has finished inside the top 10 in 3 straight races here at Darlington, and looking kind of at the data, like he's ranked inside the top 15 in speed in all 4 of the Darlington races with the next gen car. Looking at, I mean, just looking at the data, like this is a top 10 car we're getting at plus money. So
Mhm.
it's really hard for me not to have interest in Bubba. And then like when you add in, even going to like Homestead, he had a lot of speed at Homestead last year, and he finished inside the top 10 in that race. So 2311 Toyota, they've been fantastic this year outside of Kansas. I don't know what was going on last weekend, but I'm going to go back to the well here. I really like Tyler Reddick. There's just no value on Tyler Reddick.
Yeah.
Tyler Reddick's one of my favorite drivers this weekend coming into the weekend because he's really good here, but there's no value. But at least we're showing a little bit of value here on Bubba Wallace top 10 at plus 115.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Certainly Kansas a little concerning, but they looked so good at Las Vegas that maybe they were trying something out, or I don't know what. But unfortunately, Kansas wasn't the best for them. But look for 2311 to bounce back at Darlington. For my top 10 bet, of course, like I said, I'm going to go a different price range here. And this is just a lean for me, so I've not bet it, but I do technically have value on it. And in a week where it's hard to find value, I certainly could get behind if you want to bet this. If you're listening and decide you want to have a little action, this is one spot I would go to. And I'm going to lean Carson Hocevar for a top 10 finish at 10-1. And when we talk about Carson Hocevar, of course, we have to look at his Truck Series results at Darlington. And he is good here. He has a 3rd place finish. He has a 2nd place finish, and he has a 5th place finish at Darlington. Plus, he won at Homestead in the Truck Series. He also, had 4th place finish at Bristol in the Truck Series last year. Bristol Dirt, he's done well in the Truck Series, which I think is semi-comparable just because it did chew up some tires a little bit. And if we look in the Xfinity Series, his best Xfinity Series finish was a 6th place finish at Darlington in the Xfinity Series. Last year, he ran in the 42 for Legacy Motor Club and in the Cup Series and finished 17th, which was one of his better finishes of the year last year as well in that number 42. So, 10-1, it's a long shot, but I think it's a long shot that you could definitely take. I have this at plus 975 as fair value. So like I said, we're talking really thin value here. The market is pretty sharp this week, but if you do want a little bit of action, I don't mind Carson Hocevar top 10-1.
He's been really good this year. Just in general, like he has been kind of like the one bright spot. Like we kind of all expected LaJoy to kind of take that next step, and like he's just kind of not having a good season, I think is the nicest way to put it. So Carson Hocevar is a wheelman, and we know like he's very talented. I'd love to see him in like a top tier car. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but I've been very impressed by him.
Well, and speaking of, maybe will he be in a top tier car soon? Not yet, but he is going to have a new teammate next year with Michael McDowell joining Spire Motorsports. He's going to go in that number 71 that Zane Smith is in. Presumably, Zane will head over to Trackhouse where he is under contract. But Stevie, just before we go into turn 3, thoughts on the early silly season news?
I think it's going to be a wild year as far as NASCAR news. I don't know if I would have done it if I was McDowell, but we all kind of question like Justin Haley's move from like colleague racing to Rick Ware Racing this year, and he's running better than the colleague cars. So it's really tough because like Justin Haley made a decision that we all were like, huh, and it's really working out for him. Maybe Mike McDowell knows more than we do, right? Maybe there's more to this story than the public knows right now.
Yeah, and one of those rumors, and I know Bob Pockers has talked about it, the potential merger of Stewart-Haas Racing and Front Row Motorsports, which, if they merge, they can only have 4 cars. And right now they have 6 between them. So somebody's got to go from that team. And I think it's a logical move for McDowell when you think about it in that regards. So little tangent there. I guess that was our trip down the backstretch. But before we get into turn 3, I want to remind you Running Hot is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. For new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Bonus code ACTION will give new users in North Carolina $150 in bonus bets for betting just $5. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Okay, 2 turns down, 2 turns to go. We're going to dive into turn 3. Turn 3, Stevie, we are in the manufacturer turn. We've both got a couple of manufacturer picks here. Which one is yours in turn 3?
So, had you asked me like a month ago, I was like, I'm getting some type of exposure to Eric Jones when we go to Darlington, and then he had the injury. He's been out of the car the last 2 weeks. We assume that he's going to be in the car this weekend from everything that has been said. No, his outright just doesn't show any value to me, but this line does. We get Eric Jones as the top Toyota at 20-1. I did a quarter of a unit on this, and a lot of that has to do with like bankroll management, like I talked about, and like the back worries me. The back is very concerning. If the back is okay, Eric Jones has the upside to win this race. I mean, he is so good at Darlington. He's done it in good equipment. He's done it in bad equipment. He's done it in trucks. He's done it in Xfinity. He's done it in Cup. Anytime we go to Darlington, we're like, hey, where's Eric Jones? Because we know that he's going to be a contender for this race. So if he shows any type of speed in practice and qualifying, there's no chance you're going to get 20-1 as top Toyota.
Yeah,
I think a lot's going to happen for him to need to be top Toyota because like Martin Truex and Denny are so good here. Bell's so good here. So like there's not a ton of value in this line. It's just like you're not getting a better line than 20-1. And I'll probably try to find some like group bets and head-to-heads for Eric Jones if he has speed in practice. But right now, I had to get some exposure to Jones because he's the guy that it just clicks for. It clicks for him at Darlington.
It really does. This is a great track for Eric Jones. And I talked about this earlier in the week. My hesitation with Eric Jones is the back injury. But I think this is the one market where I would maybe pick Eric Jones for this week going into the weekend before we see him, on track for practice and things like that, because this one is the biggest value. And this is actually one of the only ones where I do have value on Eric Jones in terms of my model. I don't have value on his outright, don't have value on his top 10, those kinds of things. So if he really is going to be Eric Jones, I would play the upside, which I think this top Toyota bet does really well. And because there's only 8 Toyotas in this race, 20-1 is so long. He has the potential to win the race, as we've talked about. So I think this is the one spot I would consider playing Eric Jones at 20-1. And look, when you're out of this car, even for a couple weeks, that's pretty big. It's one of those things where Alex Bowman injured his back. Out 6 weeks, came back, wasn't the same. Chase Elliott injured his leg, out 6 weeks, came back, wasn't the same. I know this is only 2 weeks, but 2 weeks can still give you some rust, and especially when you injure your back. You drive the car through your butt and your back, right? You need that feeling, and if there's any kind of issues there, any difficulty there, I certainly do worry about Eric Jones. So like I said, I would play an upside market if he really is going to be true Eric Jones. For my turn 3 pick, I'm going to lean Noah Gragson as the top Ford driver. Best available right now is plus 750 from what I see. And this is a good spot, I think, for Noah Gragson. I mean, obviously, he's amazing at Darlington. If we look at Noah Gregson's final 4 Darlington results in the Xfinity Series, so 2021 and 2022, finished 4th at Darlington, but led the most laps. He had a win. He finished 2nd, and he had a win while leading the most laps. I mean, that's incredible. He was either 1st or 2nd or led the most laps in all 4 of his Darlington races in the final 2 years. And heck, even in 2020, he had a 5th place finish where he led the most laps and a 7th place finish. So just a great track for Noah Gragson. Now, yes, he didn't perform very well at Darlington last year in that Legacy Motor Club car. He finished 26th in the Goodyear 400 last year. But as we all know, Noah Gragson was just kind of off last year. He was a full-time rookie. He had a lot of, personal, I guess, conflicts going on. But he's in a much better spot this year. So I think Noah Gragson could arguably be the best Ford in this race. Now, this is a good track for Joey Logano. It's a good track for Brad Keselowski. Not an amazing track for Ryan Blaney, so that helps kind of bring him back to the field, which is where I do think Noah Gragson gets some value. And Chris Buescher is listed ahead of Noah Gragson in the top Ford market. And while Buescher did have a top 5 car in the second Darlington race last year, the other 3 Darlington races in the next gen car, he struggled mightily. So it's one of those, has Buescher really figured it out, or was that, one race an anomaly? So I think that's where some top Ford value opens up on Noah Gragson as well.
Yeah, driving like he has something to prove this year, just in general.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been the best car out of the Stewart-Haas camp this year, and he just consistently does it, and he's good at qualifying. I mean, this is something we talked about a lot with Noah Gragson in the Xfinity, series, is like he's just good at qualifying. So I think if you're going to bet Noah as a top Ford and you want this number, this is the time to do it. Or you kind of hope that like he struggles in qualifying, you can maybe take advantage of it. I will say, like, I was really excited to bet Brad Keselowski as top Ford, and there's no value because I really like Keselowski this week. I wanted to bet his outright, no value.
Yeah,
it's just
same.
one of those weeks. It's just you're kind of hoping. I'm just kind of hoping Keselowski qualifies like 15th, and like I could potentially take advantage of that. But yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting week when it comes to value.
Yeah, I was super into Keselowski when I ran my model, and I was like, oh man, I can't wait to bet him. And then they open him like 18-1. I'm like, damn, there's no value there. No. Especially, and then I think he moved to like 16-1 or something. 18-1 I think is the longest out there right now. So tough with Brad Keselowski, but that's why I'm leaning Noah Gragson top Ford. So just a lean for me. It's one of those spots where Darlington is still a tricky track, and he still is a young driver. So it could be a terrible race for him. It could be a really good race for him. So I'm going to lean Noah Gragson top Ford plus 750. Stevie's turn 3 pick, Eric Jones, top Toyota 20-1. So we only have one turn left, and that's turn 4. All right, final turn here, Stevie. We're both going back to the top 10 well, but this time we're in the exact same price range. Which driver do you have?
Yeah, I'm going to go to Ricky Stenhouse Jr. for a top 10 here at 6-1. It's kind of a little funsy bet. I think that Stenhouse, when he doesn't have issues, has top 10 speed at a racetrack like this. Like, he's really good at steep tracks. He's good at high tire wear tracks. And we talk about him all the time at Bristol. And this is a racetrack that he's actually had really good speed. He just always seems to have something come up. It's just that not necessarily the guy you want to bet like an outright. The one thing that concerns me about Stenhouse is like his pit crew has just been atrociously bad this year. So terrible. That is like the biggest concern here. I think on track though, he's going to have some good speed. And the one thing like on the flip side of like the pit crew is his crew chief is very aggressive. So like when we talk strategy on like how the final stage kind of plays out, do you pit twice? Do you pit once? I could see Stenhouse being aggressive, running deep, and just kind of falling into a top 10 here as well. So I'm going to take this little funsy here on Stenhouse at 6-1 for a top 10.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is the type of track that he does well at. He's always done great at Bristol concrete in the past. He's done great at the mile and a half, some of them, especially Kansas, Texas. He looked awesome, which is not a high tire wear track, but, still an intermediate package race. And Darlington, he's had speed in the past as well. So certainly a spot where, I definitely think it's possible for Ricky Stenhouse Jr. to finish inside the top 10. I technically don't have value on it, but it's pretty close for me. So again, one of those spots where I don't mind if you want to go against the model, at least my model, for Ricky Stenhouse Jr. top 10, 6-1. For my turn 4 pick, I am going to Michael McDowell, top 10, 6-1 now. I gave this out on Green Dot Daily, but it is still 6-1 out there. And I actually really like this one. Michael McDowell has been performing pretty darn well this year, really well at some of the intermediate tracks, and at Darlington and at Homestead in the past, he's done well enough to justify this number. Look, he has 2 top 10s in 4 Darlington starts in the next gen era. And if we add in Homestead, he has 3 top 10s since 2021, which I think is a sample of, around 13 races. So that's much clear of 6-1, right? 3 divided by 13 is much better than 6-1 odds that we're getting here. And if we look at, the 4 higher speed intermediate races we've run this year, so Las Vegas, if we look at Dover, Texas, and Kansas, Michael McDowell has spent around half of the laps inside the top 15. And historically at Darlington, you need to spend about 40 to 42% of the laps inside of the top 15 to have about a 1 in 7 chance of finishing inside the top 10. So he's well clear of that. And that's why my model has him closer to 5-1 as fair value. Now, I actually have plus 470 as fair value, but like my upper bound in terms of my error bars is like plus 515. So if you want to bet it down to maybe plus 525, plus 500, I don't mind. But definitely like 6-1 on Michael McDowell.
Something to prove. He's going to be in the talks all weekend as far as all the news and stuff. The one thing that I will say here for McDowell is he's been fantastic in qualifying this year. Pit road selection is so huge at Darlington because there's so many bad spots and so many good spots. So if he could have another good outing in qualifying and kind of set himself up with track position, that's really good as well. So Michael McDowell reminds me of Ryan Newman at tracks like this, just consistently like an 8th to like 14th place car. You just kind of hope you're on the right side of the variance here.
Yeah, exactly. But hey, if you're an 8th to a 14th place car, 6-1's a little too long.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I don't hate it either.
Yeah, exactly. So turn 4 is back to the top 10. Well, pair of 6-1 picks. Stevie has Ricky Stenhouse Jr., 6-1 top 10. I have Michael McDowell, 6-1 for a top 10 finish. So there's only one thing left to do. We've made that lap around Darlington, and we're going to drive into victory lane. So, Stevie, I talked about this guy earlier in the podcast. Where are we going for our victory lane pick?
Yeah, we're going to go to Seabell, top 5, plus 190 at BetMGM. I had already bet this top 5, and you kind of talked me into, like, talking through, like, the Bell outright led to my second outright bet of the weekend. But, I mean, the speed's going to be there. The speed is always there for Christopher Bell. The pit crew's been fantastic. He's really good at qualifying. Like, everything on paper sounds really good for Seabell. It's just, a track where you got to rip the top. He's really good at doing that. A track where you're going to be searching around for a grip. He's really good at doing that. So, like, everything for Christopher Bell makes sense. It's just whether or not, like, does he have any issues? I mean, like, every time it feels like Bell has, like, a race-winning car, someone tags him or something, and it's just, I feel like he's so unlucky sometimes. But I like Christopher Bell this weekend just in general, the more that we have talked about it, and I definitely like his top 5 here at plus 190 on BetMGM.
Yeah, a lot of those intangibles have gotten me even higher on Bell than I already was. So glad we did talk about it. That just the pit crew stuff, the fact that there's gonna be so many pits in a race, this race potentially, the qualifying speed that he's had, which would give him potentially great, pit stall selection. He just won the pole last week at Kansas. So a lot of good things going here for Christopher Bell. And again, in the next gen era, all 4 Darlington races, he's arguably had a top 5 or at worst a top 6 car. Sometimes he's finished in the top 6, 2 of the 4, and 2 other times he's had issues that caused him not to. But when you're consistently a top 6 car, plus 190 for a top 5, just a little bit too long there. I think I'd play this down to maybe around plus 175, even maybe plus 150. That's kind of like the borderline of where my model has value. I do like to always leave a little bit of wiggle room there, so maybe plus 175, but plus 190 at BetMGM, definitely too long for Christopher Bell's top 5. So that is going to do it for us. Thank you for listening to the Goodyear 400 episode of Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. We'll be back not next week because we have the All-Star break and not going to be a whole lot to talk about for bets, but we'll be back in 2 weeks as we talk bets for the Coca-Cola 600 at Charlotte Motor Speedway and potentially an Indy 500 episode as well, like I did last year. So definitely in 2 weeks, it is the big motorsports weekend of the year. On behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thanks again for listening, and we see you back here next week on Running Hot from Action Network.